So for today's video, I'm going to share with you some interesting research that I just made of what makes a successful applicant with these high-performing companies. And this is, by the way, based 100% on my own experiences. And before getting into that, let me first talk about a few very common misconceptions when it comes to the least interesting predictors of success in a job interview. The first one being people who start early, start preparing early, get the job. So statistically speaking, yes, you might be right that people start early. The percentage of people who start early might be higher than the other ones. But from this to saying that this would be a guarantee, not at all. Not at all. The second least interesting predictor of success would be people who speak well get the jobs. Again, not at all. Forget about it. Third, people who have a good-looking CV and who worked previously for a high-performing company tend to get jobs. Again, statistically, you might be right, but from here to be an insurance couldn't be further from the truth. The next one here is people who know the questions in advance in these interviews actually get the jobs. Again, couldn't be further from the truth, and in fact I don't know anyone who got the job and who had the questions in advance. And what I believe happens here is that when you have all that information, you become overwhelmed, or maybe reassured to some extent, and you cannot really focus and prepare the best possible answers because of the volume of information, or because you're simply overconfident. And what happens, you deliver a so-so performance during the interview, which won't fly with any of these companies. And last but not least, and very important to note here, is that all the people who get these jobs are nice people. No, it doesn't work this way. Now let's get to what do those people, those successful ones, have all in common according to my statistics or my research, however you want to call this. The first behavior here would be that people who get the job all know very well where they are and what they're looking for. For example, if someone would talk to me 3 weeks before an interview, while they would make an assessment of where they are, they could have an approach such as, okay, I feel like I'm confident enough to, I don't know, prepare for 3 days now and the rest only 5 days or 4 days before the interview. Some people that understand these things, how much they want to prepare or where they are right now in the process, they are very likely to get the job. And I gave this example precisely to say that it's not the ones that get prepared every day for 3 weeks until the interview. It could be that someone would understand that they would need to prepare every day until the interview, and then they would be successful. Yes, happened to me quite often actually. But the main thing to understand here is that you must know very well where you are and where you're going. This is super important, and I would very much encourage you to do self-assessment to really understand where you need to improve, where you actually need to improve, not where you like to improve. It's a huge difference. The second very strong predictor of a successful candidate would be their ability to cope with stress. And I would even go further to say their ability to ramp up their performance under pressure. In fact, it's not by mistake that in some interviews the bar raisers try to push your limits to see how you would react, because high performance would always, ramp up their performance when in such a situation where lower performance would actually tend to duck and take as many hits as possible. So you must be able to cope very well with stress and ultimately not be a quitter, because you'll be surprised how many people actually quit preparing for the job interview. So the lucky scenario is when someone assesses 3 weeks before the interview that they only need 1 week, that they know that they will only need 1 week. But what happens most of the time is that people start 3 weeks in advance, then they prepare maybe for 10 days, then they get depressed, and then they no longer do anything until 3 days before the interview when it's too late. Right? So this is what I mean by stress, and this is what I mean by not being able to deliver or to cope well with these stressful situations. Okay, so this was the second one. Now the third one is people who get these jobs focus very well on what matters to them. For example, I am yet to hear from a successful job applicant that, hey Dan, I watched all of your YouTube videos. It never happened with the successful ones. Well, why? Because simply, it doesn't make much sense to say, hey, I watched all your 300 plus videos just for the sake of a job interview, or it's not the best employment of your time in the first place. And by the way, people come to me exclusively because they know of my YouTube channel here. So finding the right balance of what matters to you, it's very important. And I know it's a little bit linked with the know where you are that I talked in the beginning, but these are two separate things, like know where you are and what you need in order to improve. What's the best approach, what's the best strategy or tactic, and so on. The next one, the third one is that successful applicants couldn't care less about their English speaking skills. Like, it's that simple. I know, it doesn't make sense for an English speaker, for a native English speaker, but for the international ones. I once coached a guy with whom I could understand only 60% of what he said, maybe even less. That's 1 in 2 words, right? We basically couldn't understand each other based on words, but we could understand each other based on behaviors. And you could immediately spot when someone has leadership skills and has what's needed to get the job done. It was for a junior role in this case. When compared to someone who can speak very well English, but who tends to be arrogant, for example. I would always go with the person that has the right behavior. I couldn't care less about his English speaking skills, which, by the way, I could tune up in 1 week if I wanted to. Right? So English speaking skills are much less essential than you would think. And I would even argue that international candidates have an advantage over native English speakers, because if you don't speak fluently, you have time to think what to say. And if you have time to think what you say, your behavior, the type of behavior you're showcasing is superior, right? So English speaking skills don't matter. This is the simple way. And finally, everyone that I know who got hired, with whom I kept in touch, had strong failure stories, and did not have one failure story, but had like 3 or 5 or even more failure stories. So you should reach a level where you shouldn't shy away from talking about your failures, about explaining things in a very realistic fashion, because it's a trend. If you're able to speak well about failures, you're going to be able to speak well about all the other scenarios as well. So prepare failure stories if you want a very straightforward type of advice here. So just a quick recap here. So people that actually get these jobs know very well where they are, where they stand, and what they need to, where they're going. These types of people cope very well with stress, and actually when dealing with a stressful situation, they ramp up their performance. People who do well in job interviews couldn't care less about their English speaking skills. The behavior is very important. And finally, they feel very comfortable talking about failures, and actually do prepare in advance, in many cases, these failure stories, because they understand the importance of talking about things that don't come in naturally for a job interview. So there you go. I hope you found at least some of this information useful, and thank you very much for watching.